Good evening, everybody. So it's Tuesday the 15th of April and it's the Cabinet meeting this evening. We've got quite a long agenda, but I'm hoping we'll move through it fairly swiftly and do it all justice. Habs, this is your last meeting with us. I'm going to embarrass you and say it's your last meeting with us. I know you're not going to leave the authority just yet, but you are moving on. Can I just put on record, I've thoroughly enjoyed working with you. I will miss you terribly. We wish you all the very best in your new role. But in the time-honoured fashion, would you like to tell us who's missing this evening?
Thank you very much for your kind words. We've got apologies from councillors Davenport Ray and Wakeford.
Thank you. Can we move on then to the minutes, which we've had from the meetings on the 18th and 19th of March? We've already had them and circulated them. Is there anything anybody wishes to raise to do with those minutes? No, in which case, can I have a show of hands if you're happy to approve them as a correct record? Thank you very much. I shall put a signature on these. And one on the second lot. Thank you. Thank you very much, Habs. In which case we move on to item 2, which is members' interest. So this is an opportunity for members, if they need to disclose a declaration where there's a disclosable pecuniary or other registrable or non-registrable interest in relation to any agenda item. Does anybody have anything to declare? Oh my goodness, there's lots of hands. Okay, we'll start down this side of the table and then we'll move over to here. So Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. I need to declare an interest in an item further down the agenda, which is private and confidential. So if I, at that point, explain why. So I just thought I'd highlight it now, but explain in more detail when we go to a closed session.
Thank you. Duly noted, and we'll take the details from you when we move to that part of the agenda. Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
My interest is in the same item, actually. I don't know if you want to declare it now or later on.
Well, we'll take it as a declaration now, and then we can confirm it when we move to that item. Thank you very much. Councillor Howell.
Mine's on item 3 because I'm the Executive Councillor on Leisure.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Mine is agenda item 3. I'm the member of the Fire Authority, so I shall leave when we're discussing that particular item on the SIL. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Taylor. I don't think we've had quite so many declarations for a while. As we get to the relevant items, if you need to take guidance about leaving or staying, we're happy to do that. Thank you very much for making sure that we are all correct. Let's move on then to item 3, which is the Community Infrastructure Levy Fund, the SIL funding. And this is to receive a report, and I think it might be Councillor Sanderson who's going to do the SIL report for us.
It is, Chair. Good evening. Thank you. So I'm pleased to say that we've done, or the team rather, have done another round of community infrastructure levy and some very positive recommendations, which we always try and do. I know sometimes applicants are disappointed, frustrated with the process, which we understand, but I think the team have done a superb job here. And it was very well received when we went to scrutiny. So if I just run through some of those recommendations, which I just lower down the agenda. Thank you. And I'll go to the first one, which is to note that the updates on delivery in relation to the projects previously allocated or in receipt of SIL funding. That's an appendix.
Councillor Sanderson, sorry to interrupt you. I've suddenly realised that some of our colleagues were going to leave for this item and haven't left. So in fact, they're going to leave now, I believe. So Councillor Howell's got there quicker, and I think Councillor Taylor's going to leave for this one as well.
No, if I can seek advice, I will leave when we are going to discuss the fire application, because I have no interest to declare on any
other
others.
items.
Yeah.
Thank you for the clarity. Do we have the same issue with Councillor Howell? In which case, do we need to retrieve Councillor Howell? Oh, she stood in the doorway. Councillor Howell, would you like to come back? So when we get to the appropriate bit, which is the particular element of this report that concerns you, Councillor Sanderson will probably at that point pause if he's realised early enough, and if not, we might interrupt you again. Councillor Sanderson, apologies for that. It's just important that we get the process so that it's right. Thank you.
And if I may, Chair, in that case, if we, as we're going to do that, I think then be really clear when we move on to the leisure item. So Councillor Howell can leave and Councillor Taylor stays, and then we pause while Councillor Howell comes in and Councillor Taylor leaves. So Councillor Sanderson, if you're just able to, but we'll assist if we think we're drifting into those.
Thank you very much, Chair, for clarifying all of that. So if I move to the recommendations, obviously I will do the ones that affect our Cabinet colleagues last. So the first recommendation is, we obviously noted the updates on delivery in relation to the projects previously allocated that are in receipt of SIL funding, and that's in Appendix 1. Point B, we noted the SIL projects for up to £100,000 which are delegated. As members will know, if they've looked at the pack, that in fact none of those were recommended for approval, which I think we found a little bit disappointing, and there'll be some further work with our town and parish council colleagues. There'll be a parish forum in the distant future as well, not too distant future, and we're working more closely with them. That's obviously something we'd like to encourage and perhaps be in a position where we can recommend some of those for approval. So item C, we've agreed to recommend for approval funding for the guardroom at the Bury Community Hub, which I think is a very good project. They've applied before, were declined, but they came back, were very helpful, worked really well with the team, so we're able to give them some approval. We did decline at point D the funding for Kimbolton and Stoneleigh. They were looking at 2 community playgrounds. We felt that didn't link in and didn't unlock growth. I understand some disappointment for them, but obviously we're happy to work again with Kimbolton and Stoneleigh Parish Council. So if I go on to the recommendation at E, in which case I think Councillor Howell may need to leave for that one.
Thank you, Councillor Howell. For those watching online, we will have a sort of movement in and out of the room.
Yeah, absolutely.
Councillor Howell has now departed.
Thank you. So this was very well received, not surprisingly, at the panel. Councillor Bywater actually contacted me yesterday to say he would like to have been here to support this application, but is unable to be here for family reasons. But obviously this links in with a project we're seeking to achieve at Sawtree, and excellent piece of work. I think if you look at the report, you'll see that it was actually some very good mapping about the lack of swimming facilities in this northern part of the district. So that, as we know, this project is seeking to try and bring that back to the community. And I thought that was very encouraging that our One Leisure team are working with the planning department, planning policy, and we're now in a position to approve. So at this point, I'll just stop and ask if members have any questions about recommendation E at all.
No, it doesn't appear there is, in which case are we moving on to F, in which case we have to invite Councillor Taylor to depart briefly so we can move on to the fire item. So Simone, thank you.
I'm just trying to understand how we're doing this, because I would like to comment on the other thing. So I would like to comment on the other items. So how we, yeah.
I'd suggest this is a good point then. If members wish to comment on other items, please do so, yeah.
To Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. Yeah, because if I go out now, I won't have the opportunity to comment on the item. So I just wanted to pick up on the, sorry, I'll be with you in a minute.
So as if you didn't have enough interest, I am also the local member for Priory Park and Little Paxton, on which the fire station is located, although I'm not sure that that's necessarily any sort of interest, but I'm just letting you know anyway. Thank you.
If I may, thank you, Chair. The distinction is that Councillor Taylor is a member of the Fire Authority, and that's what creates the conflict. Being the local ward member, it doesn't create the conflict in terms of what we're doing, because you're not wearing your ward member hat, you're wearing your special responsibility as a cabinet member, and therefore setting exec decisions.
Thank you. So Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd just like to comment on the layout and how different this is now, our reports, and how much more in depth we have to look at, including the plans, whereas a year, 2 years ago, it was a paragraph, which obviously when we reviewed the governance, etc., this is absolutely so much better. And I would like to say thank you to the officers to, giving us that more detail. I just want to pick up on the guardroom at Bury. I'm just trying to understand the growth element on this one, because although I've just said, yes, there's a lot of detail in here, certainly more detail, and I want to commend the parish on their business plan of what I've seen. It's fantastic with everything that's, a visual part of it, seeing what they're going to include. But it's the only thing that I'm a bit worried about is, so the principle of statement of intent, primary use of SIL is to fund infrastructure that is directly linked to supporting or mitigating the impact of growth and new development. So we're asking, has it been met? They're saying yes. There has been large growth without community space increase. I don't know if Councillor Sanderson knows how much growth we've had in Bury. I know that we've got Upward and that area that's been developed, but do we have any figures? I think that's the only thing that I'm worried about, is that it's a lot of money, and is it going to be utilised?
Thank you very much for the question. So you're right, is it a lot of funding there? I think it's 1.5 million. So yeah, a lot of funding. The original ask was just under 2.4 million. So I think the key here is it not just meets existing growth, it unlocks potential for growth. So it gives the community something, facilities for potential new development. As we know with our local plan, with the increase in housing numbers, that's only going to rise. And I think what impressed the team was the work that they'd done within the community and the consultations they'd carried out. So it's not simply the parish council saying we think this is a nice idea. They'd really gone into depth and looked really projected into the future with this project. And if you look at the elevations and the plans, I mean, it's almost like a planning application. It's so detailed. And I think their phrase, and I'll steal it from here, they use a phrase, I think, words to the effect of it. I'm sorry, my computer's juddering the microphone. So I think if you look at the phrase they use here, they basically says it's high quality. It included a business plan, costing schedule, and evidence of match funding, which is always key when unlocking SIL. So I think if we were able to bridge that gap between the funding they've got and the funding they need, I think this is where SIL comes into its own.
Thank you, Councillor Sanderson. Are there any other comments or questions on the items A to E? In which case then, Councillor Taylor, I'm going to invite you to depart, and if you could ask Councillor Howell to step back in, and we will then discuss item F, and then she can ask any questions about the items that she's missed, but we will not cover the one where she has an interest, just in case there are questions that she wished to ask. So we'll just wait for Councillor Howell to rejoin us. This is where we need some interlude music. I'm not going to provide any.
There's a phrase for it, isn't there?
Elevator music. This is where the people joining us online who haven't been in the meeting all along will be looking at the screen and thinking, well, what's going on at this point? So if I talk, at least you'll know that you haven't lost your sound, because otherwise you might be thinking that the microphones have all gone off. Muzak, there we are. There we are.
Music played in retail stores.
Thank you, Councillor Howell. You saved me from having to create some interlude music so that so that those online realised that we hadn't all gone silent. Councillor Howe, we will discuss item F, and then if there are any questions you wish to ask about the other items, because Councillor Taylor's had that opportunity, then you can raise any questions about the item that is not the one that you have an interest in. Councillor Sanderson, back to you for item F, please.
Thank you, Chair. So if I go to the fire station in a little bit more detail, which is recommended funding for £700,000. As it says in the report, it was built in the 1960s, served the community well, but it's clearly outdated and not entirely suitable for purpose for delivering the engagement activities within the communities. Again, the Fire Authority applied previously, that was declined, but they submitted a much more robust application and detailed business plan, again with some match funding. Previously they hadn't linked this to growth, but as you know, there's a lot of growth in and around St Neots. We were discussing Wintringham Park, for example, at DMC last night. So the Fire Authority have very much done that, and we're saying that it has strong links to local growth and the need to increase in community engagement in this area in a growing population. So we are recommending approval, as I said, for SIL funding for up to £700,000 for this project.
Thank you, Councillor Sanderson. Are there any questions about item F or items A to D? Any questions or comments? No, in which case I'm going to take some advice. Can we now recall Councillor Taylor in terms of the voting?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, and then if I can suggest that Councillor Sanderson takes each recommendation on its own, so that way for those watching online, it's really clear that when Councillor Howell and Councillor Taylor aren't voting because they've declared their interest in that, but you've had the debate and now you're moving to the vote, so that means that's transparent. And then Habs will be able to record that in terms of the voting of who's done that, again back to the purpose of the minutes.
Thank you very much. So just for Councillor Taylor's benefit, we're going to take each of the recommendations individually so that when you get to one that you have an interest in, you are then able to not participate in that particular vote. So if everybody is content then, I'm going to move through them one at a time. So recommendation A is to note the updates, so I don't need a vote on that. Recommendation B is to note the allocated funding. I don't need a vote on that, but I am going to need a vote for item C. So item C is to agree the officer recommendation at paragraph 4.2 to approve funding for Bury Guardroom Community Hub. Can I have a show of all those in favour of the recommendation to approve Bury Guardroom? Thank you very much. That's unanimous. So then if I move to D, D is the officer recommendation at paragraph 4.3 to decline funding for Kimbolton and Stoneleigh 2 community playgrounds. Can I have a show of all those in favour of declining? Thank you, that's again unanimous. I'm going to move to item E. So this is one of the pecuniary interest ones. So this is the item where we're asked to agree officer recommendations at paragraph 4.4 to approve funding for leisure improvements at Salttree. Can I have a show of those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you very much. And then moving to item F, this is another one where we have an interest declared. So this is to agree officer recommendation at paragraph 4.6 to approve funding for the community fire station modernisation and extension project at St Neots. Can I have a show of those in favour? Those against? Any abstentions? So Councillor Taylor, I believe that might be an abstention from you because you've got an interest. Thank you. A chance to record that, in which case thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Sanderson, for your report. Can I also pass on my thanks to officers, because we have, over the times that we've looked at SIL, as Councillor Taylor has already commented, we've made a number of requests about wanting more detail and more transparency. Officers have met those requests, and I think we've had a very good opportunity to consider those recommendations in full this evening. So thank you very much to our officer cohort, and thank you, Councillor Sanderson, for your work to bring this forward. Thank you. In which case then we move to the next item on our agenda. So I'm just scrolling back to the top. So we move on to item 4, which is land availability assessments and sustainability appraisal for additional sites submitted between the 1st of August 2024 and the 31st of January 2025. So this is a report that Councillor Sanderson is going to present on those assessments and sustainability appraisals. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So as you said, the report presents the outcome of the LLAA and sustainability appraisals for additional sites between the 1st of August and the 31st of January. So a little bit of context here. Between the 29th of March and the 7th of June, the Council issued a call for sites, and that's the process where people could submit sites that could have the potential to be allocated in the next local plan for a variety of uses. So some sites were submitted after the 1st of August and they were too late to be considered in the consultation, which we held between September and November, and that the ongoing call for sites closed on the 31st of January. But a further 68 sites from across the district have been submitted and assessed subsequently from that point. And just moving ahead to the recommendations and discussion at our scrutiny panel, which are further down. A lot of questions from Councillor Chapman on that night, and St Neots Town Council submitted, I think, around 27 sites which they felt needed designated as public open space. Town Council, I understand, had some concerns about flooding. I did actually receive an update earlier today from the team who actually went through each site in some detail, which I'll forward to colleagues and to scrutiny. It was felt that the best way to do this was actually through the neighbourhood plan, which I believe St Neots are in the process of refreshing. They, in fact, were the first parish to ever submit and get approval for through referendum for a neighbourhood plan. And some of them, I think, some of the sites in question actually have already been categorised as they would wish, so they have made some progress. Councillor Gardner typically asked a question about parish councils and how have we improved things in terms of them submitting their responses. I think we learned our lessons from previous rounds, and the responses have been more manageable, and there's been better signposting, I think, and very good response from parishes, I have to say. We do need to just tweak our communications plan that has been updated. Again, that's something that we need to share through the democratic process, just to make sure that people are aware of how things are changing as we go through the process. And again, thanks to the team who've processed a tremendous amount of work as we've gone through this latest iteration. So if I move to the recommendations, I'll just summarise those briefly, if I may. So we're being asked to approve the contents of the land availability assessment and sustainability appraisal for additional sites submitted between the 1st of August and the 31st of January. And we will agree this evening, hopefully, to publish for public consultation for 6 weeks. That'll run between the 23rd of April and the 4th of June to hear comments from interested parties and the public. And the final recommendation is to grant delegated authority to the Head of Planning, Infrastructure and Public Protection in consultation with myself to make any necessary typographical or other minor changes to the document prior to its publication for consultation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Sanderson. There's a huge amount of work that has gone into producing this report. Thank you very much. Are there any comments? We're open to questions or debate if anybody would like to raise anything. Councillor Taylor?
Thank you. Yeah. Just thinking about the public consultation, because obviously prior to that we had public consultation when this was first set off, and there were a few, hairs running when people saw certain areas of the district up for assessment, call for land. So are we doing a very similar thing with the consultation, or have we learned a little bit about what happened previously, and making sure that, you know, the public understand what their role is in this and that how they can comment instead of getting scared by, you know, this call for land and assessment. So thank you, Councillor Sanderson.
Chair, thank you to Councillor Taylor for that question. That's a very good point, because of course rumours do fly around, don't they, when we're discussing matters like this. I've had some members of the council say to me their parishes are very anxious because they've seen a call for sites and they've seen their parish highlighted and areas that they know quite well. So this is not a site allocation. We haven't got to that point yet. That will be in the autumn of this year. But I think my message is that it doesn't necessarily mean that a site will be developed. There's obviously a process to go through with that, go through due process with the planning system. And I think parishes are aware and colleagues are aware, of course, changes to the NPPF with increase of around 50% in our housing numbers. So there will be a bigger share of development, if I can use that phrase. So I understand the anxiety around that, and I think it's key that through our communications plan we engage with our communities. Development can be very good. It can unlock a lot of things, as we were discussing earlier with SIL. It can create a lot of improvements, and we are a very high growth area. We're a desirable part of the country to live in, and long may that continue. But certainly I'm keen to hear from colleagues if they have any individual concerns, and I know the team are as well.
Thank you, Councillor Sanderson. Any other comments or questions? No, if I may, from the chair, I would also echo that there's always a level of angst. I've lived through the previous iteration of the local plan, as have some of you around this table, in terms of that consultation process. And I would again just reiterate that it is absolutely important that everybody that wishes to participate in it does, because genuinely every comment that comes in is read and considered. So sometimes I think people think that if they comment that somehow it won't make a difference, but it does make a difference, including the positives where people say this would be really good, but even better if. So actually those comments really do add value, and I would encourage any member of the public as well as our fellow constituent councils to make every opportunity to have their say. Okay, in which case then we have 3 recommendations before us. Are you happy for me to take those on block? Yep, okay. So if you're happy to take the recommendations as set out on page 48, can I have a show of hands for approval, please? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. In which case, then, I look forward to seeing that consultation go ahead, Councillor Sanderson. Again, please would you thank the team, because it's a huge amount of work. The report is relatively short in the grand scale, but the amount of work it belies is considerable. And I can see nods and smiles from my fellow councillors who appreciate the sheer volume that goes on behind the scenes. Thank you very much. In which case, then, moving us then swiftly on to item 5. I'm just going back up the agenda. Item 5. So this is our civil parking enforcement update and off-street parking places order. Councillor Taylor, I think you're going to give us an update on where we are so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we took this to overview and scrutiny. I think it was April. Like you said earlier, April has whizzed by. So the activity to deliver the civil parking in Huntingdonshire, as you know, began under the previous administration. It is still one that I are committed to. It's something that I was very glad that the previous administration started looking at. I think it was way back in 2018. So it's a long journey that we're going on. We are hopefully nearing the finish. This is another report that will take us a little step nearer. This evening's report presents an update on the parking order that supports bringing our own car parks under the civil enforcement. As you know as well, we spoke about it at full council and overview and scrutiny as well. We will be looking at reviewing our car park strategy. The scope of the strategy needs to be fully defined, but we anticipate, well, I certainly anticipate that we're going to look at how our car parks support the use of our towns. As we know, a lot of our car parks that we pay to park in are in our market towns. Pricing principles that we consider when we look at charges, as the previous strategy did as well, and the use of car parks, including the impact that CPE, civil parking enforcement, will bring. We'll see behaviour changes when this comes into force. So obviously that is the strategy. This report isn't about the strategy, but I did bring this to overview and scrutiny. So I want to just sort of understand that this report here is something that we'll look at. It's another step forward to CPE, and there are, let me just find the page, some comments from overview and scrutiny, and I think we do have a recommendation as well. Let me just find the page. So there was a lot of, I think, if I take it holistically, there was a lot of ask for finer detail in not this report, but in the what's going to happen within the enforcement and how parishes can understand what's going to happen. And I think one of the recommendations from that is exactly that. So it was to provide detail to each parish council as to what they can expect under the implementation of civil parking enforcement order. At the actual meeting, I did say that we have extensively spoken to towns and parishes. The officers have been in with them and spoken to them individually at our Towns and Parish Forum at St Ives. Again, we had a meeting where George spoke to towns and parishes or anyone that would, was interested in it. But the committee, it just felt like they needed that finer detail. And speaking to George, he had no problem in enabling to provide that. So he was quite happy to do that. So on that recommendation, just to let Cabinet know that the officer that will be providing this has said there is no issue with this, he can do it. So back to you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Taylor. Are there any comments or questions on this item? We've talked at great length over a number of months on this, so it is really an update. Councillor Sanderson.
Chair, I was going to say it's good to see this progressing, and I think we've all noticed all the signs and lines being refreshed, and parts of Huntingdon which I thought I was parking in legally, and I now realise I probably wasn't. But it's probably a good thing now that I realise that. But originally, when I saw that question from scrutiny, I thought, well, it seemed a little bit random. I wasn't really clear how that could be answered, but I think, as Councillor Taylor said, George McDowell has explained that thoroughly, so that will give a clearer idea of what sort of level of enforcement we can expect going forward. But it does come up a lot. People often ask me, when's CPE coming, and it looks like it will be very soon. So well done. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Sanderson. Any other? Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, within overview and scrutiny, I did ask the question. I wasn't quite understanding what level of detail that was needed. Certainly, George understood it, picked it up. He and his team have done all this background work and fantastic work to get to this level now, along with Cambridgeshire County Council officers as well. So he understood the question and he's quite happy that this can be provided. So I'm happy to go with officer's recommendation that he said he can provide that.
Thank you very much. So if there are no more comments or questions, then you have before you on page 513 3 recommendations, and then we've got a 4th one, which in fact appears later in the report, which we've just talked about at some length. Are you happy for us to take those on block? Yeah, including the extra one that we've confirmed that overview and scrutiny has asked us to consider, and we've confirmed we believe is deliverable. In which case, can I have a show of those in favour, please? Thank you, that's unanimous. Thank you very much, Councillor Taylor, and we very much look forward to that coming through into delivery. The next item is an update on the corporate plan and the corporate plan refresh. So this is in fact my item to report back on. So I'm just going to pull up the report. So you will know that we have a corporate plan that guides all of the work that we do as a district council. It sets out our agenda for the coming year, and it ensures that we deliver within the term of this administration the things that we committed to when we started the administration and the growing iterations of that plan. As you'd expect with any plan, there are key things that change from year to year because the actions change as we move through the plan. And we have also looked at continuing to refine our key performance indicators, which is an important part of knowing that the plan is delivering as expected and also allowing us to continually refine our performance as we move throughout the year. The original plan was adopted in 2023. So this is the iteration which takes us through from 2025 into 2026. So it is the 3rd year of delivery. Within that plan, there's obviously a great amount of detail, but I want to just pick up that there's been a number of changes specifically around the key performance indicators that refine those performance indicators and also respond to some of the comments that overview and scrutiny have made. So at 5.3, you'll notice that we have refined 2 of the key performance indicators into a single indicator. And at 5.4, you'll notice that we have added 4 new indicators, which we think will give us greater detail and allow us to be able to test how our corporate plan is in fact performing. That refinement is really important because actually it will allow us to then test whether the outcomes we think we should be able to see and capture are in fact the ones that actually materialise. If they're not, then we have the opportunity to continue to refine and tweak. But equally, if it means that we have new work to do, it allows us to do that. And then we've also at 5.5 asked to replace one indicator with a new one around enforcement, because we actually think that we can capture the work of the enforcement team slightly differently, which actually will give us a greater depth of being able to refine the performance. Again, these are things that have come up through our overview and scrutiny process and have been very welcomed. Overview and scrutiny at page 686 also gave us some quite detailed feedback as they moved through. Councillor Pitt talked about the measures that we were using around business engagements. That was really helpful. And Councillor Martin made comments around some of the key performance indicators and how we might move forward and review those somewhat differently. Councillor Jennings observed the new target for KPIs and believed it was too easy. Interestingly, we like it when somebody challenges this with the notion that something is too easy. Officers work really, really hard to make sure that the key performance indicators are challenging, but we will make sure that as we move through that we will work with our overview and scrutiny colleagues to check that they don't believe that we're having an easy life and that in fact we're having a realistic set of performance indicators that they can genuinely challenge us on to make sure that our progress is appropriate. Councillor Chapman asked a question around the local plan and how we would be informed about the evidence gathered, and Councillor Corney asked us around bringing together the public space protection orders so that we had more information in one place and what we could do around that. Councillor Catmer covered risks and looking at local government reform and any risks that that might pose to our key performance indicators. Obviously, we're still fairly early on in that process, but we will be watching closely. We are quite content that the corporate plan continues to be the focus of delivery. It remains deliverable, rather like the local plan. We are not we're not letting up on the pace. It's really important we continue to deliver as we set out to. And that takes us to the end of the overview and scrutiny comments. I'm happy now to take comments. I can see Councillor Ferguson indicating.
So thank you, Chair. I somehow fobbed this off on me to take this through scrutiny. So I took this item then. I think we had a really, really good chat about the targets in particular, but you just said that we're not letting up the pace. Actually, we're accelerating the pace. So in 24-25, we completed 21 corporate action items. In 25-26, we're adding 24 new action items. So despite the fact we've ticked some off and we've got 15 carried forward because these are often multi-year multi-year plans. This year we've got 67 total action items compared with 64 last year. I think that we have an evolving relationship with overview and scrutiny, and I think they've been critical of us in the past for not accepting their recommendations. So I'm delighted to say that I think the feedback that we got from ONS was truly exceptional and really helped us with the target setting. And though I can't quite say that we're going to adopt all their recommendations, because we're still in discussion with the service leaders, it would be unfair to set targets without their consent. We're trying to, Mr. Sloper has been working really hard to try and get the suggestions from ONS agreed into enhanced targets, and some of those suggestions I just wanted to focus on because they were truly excellent. So there was Action 28 is about working with health and social care providers to explore future models of housing, and Councillor Martin suggested that we add something in that target about that housing being fit for all stages of life. And similarly with Action 29, produce sustainable housing guidance for developers. There was a recommendation that we add sustainable and accessible housing for requirements for developers, which we're still in discussion with, but we'd like to try and add both of those things to those targets because I think they're both critically important. One of the things we always struggle with is the Disability Facilities Grant, which is rather shutting the door after the horse is bolted, when we can, if we're building the houses which are completely suitable for people at all stages of life, then we save lots of that effort and heartache downstream as we struggle to deliver those things. There's also Action 39, which is about part of our influence brief was to influence delivery of infrastructure, including East West Rail, A428, A141, and future business case and transport strategies. There was, I think, again from Councillor Martin, excellent suggestion that we add Alconbury World Railway Station to that, if we can. Now it's almost like a bit of a political, I don't want to speak on anybody else's behalf, but I'd like to see us added to the target as well. And I think also the South Lincolnshire and Fens Reservoir would also be a good thing for us to try and influence as well. So we don't need to agree those tonight, but we'd like to take the updated KPIs back to ONS on June 10th and agree them on the performance indicators. And let me just open my... So there was a question about we're merging. You said we're merging two of the active lifestyles criteria together. I think there was the observation that the target looked a bit light compared with last year, and so we're in negotiations with the service leaders to stretch that target because we agree. We failed to meet the DFG target for the past 3 years, and the team had come up with a reduction in that target, and I think ONS didn't agree with that, and I don't think I really agree with that as well. So again, we're trying to set a stretch target based on our outturn this year when that's available as well. So that's also under negotiation. Lots of enthusiasm for a new target, which is PI 18, about business engagement from the economic development team. So much enthusiasm for economic development amongst all sides of. I mean, that's come up separately in other conversations this week as we look to what happens in the future with LGR. But I can say from ONS that the appetite for economic development is completely it continues, and so the economic development team have added a new target about their engagements. I think Councillor Pitt made the comment that quite often it's not the quantity of engagements, it's about the quality as well. And so what we're going to try and do that is not to change the target, but we're going to try and add some commentary about the kind of interactions we have so we can tell. And similarly, what was previously PI 25 was about fly tipping, which is in my service area, but we've increased that to include all environmental crime, really in recognition of the fact that that team does much more than investigate fly tipping. They investigate fly tipping with a fervour which is quite unparalleled, but they also do lots of other things as well. And so we wanted to change that to reflect all the work that they do. And again, we've agreed to add a breakdown of all the kind of interventions they make on behalf of residents as well. So I think that was, excellent feedback from ONS. I think the only recommendation we're not trying to adopt is one about increasing the call centre response time, because I've got a long-held opinion that our response times are rather excellent compared to everybody else. And I don't want to be forcing targets just for the sake of forcing targets. I think sometimes, being good enough is important. But I think, really good recommendations, and hopefully, but by the time we present these on June the 10th, we will have agreed almost all of the recommendations of ONS. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. I would like to just reflect that when I was talking to the Chief Exec this evening, and when we started as a joint administration, we didn't have a corporate plan that was anywhere near this level of detail. That's not what we'd inherited. This corporate plan is incredibly detailed, it's forward-looking. The performance indicator regime is exceptional. And again, when we first started, we had very few performance indicators, and they didn't really necessarily measure the things that actually linked back to the sort of targets that we really wanted to know about as an authority. We've come so far. I think it's really incredibly heartening that the overview and scrutiny process is adding so much value, and that we're able to respond to that. I'm going to open it up for any questions or comments at this stage. Councillor Mickleborough.
He's just realised he left his name tag over on the desk. We've got a target saying cumulative footfall in market towns. Previously, we've debated how accurate that could or could not be, or what would be an accurate way of attempting to take a median average, whatever else it might be, to report on that. What have we decided with?
So I'll start, and then Councillor Ferguson might want to come in on this one. So the challenge we've got is, what else can we use as a proxy indicator of how successful our market towns are being? So by measuring the footfall, it gives us something to start with. But I think actually what we're all really grappling with is we want other ways of measuring success. When we hear anecdotally that businesses say, well, we haven't got the footfall we'd like to be as successful as we would want to be, then that gives us pause for thought about what else could we do, what else might we do that actually will stimulate and support that economic growth. So I think this gives us it's a good measure at this stage, but I think actually as we go through, we are going to want to look at other ways of working out what is actually successfully supporting our market towns to grow and to thrive. I don't know whether Councillor Ferguson wants to comment on footfall.
So it's data we've always had. We've had for years. I mean, we inherited it from the previous administration. It's something when I was first elected, I was really keen to get hold of. It's not a perfect metric. These things never are. But as we've invested so much in almost all of our market towns, but specifically in St Neots, it would be really good to see an improvement in footfall. We had that data during COVID, and St Neots Town Council during COVID had a really, really good success with expanding the farmers market. And using that data previously, we could say that on the Saturdays when we had the farmers market, we increased the footfall in town by 20%, which is a great justification for doing that. And so I think that, I mean, the data is slightly flawed. It's never going to be complete, but I think it's a useful metric in tracking how many people visit our high streets, because that's the end ambition of investing all that money in, St Neots, but also our other market towns going forward. And so, I mean, yeah, we do have an influence on that, I think, and it would be good to see that.
So maybe I didn't frame the question correctly. I'm curious how you're actually measuring. How are you going, I've got 16.2 million people across the market towns this year. Are we measuring number of people using the car parks? Have we got the little sensors that indicate as you walk in and out? Is there not the danger that someone like Councillor Ferguson might decide he wants to up his figures by walking past his sensors all day on Saturday, just to because he loves his walking? Absolutely. How accurate are those figures? And because we've had lots of debate about that, and about how you can pull various levers or turn dials to improve footfall. But it is then, we've always come back to that. How do you justify that those footfall figures are accurate? And that it feels to me as if somewhere someone has decided, well, we're going to go with what we've got. But I'm just, the nerdy geeky bit just says, well, what have we decided is going to be that nx squared times 3y approach?
I'm going to let Councillor Ferguson come back in.
So
on that, and
sorry,
he can
I
refute
missed that
whether
part of the
he's walking
question.
backwards and forwards.
So it's a commercial service that we subscribe to. I think it was called Springboard, and for many years I thought there was actually like spring sensors in some of the paving slabs, and I was disappointed to find out it's actually done with cameras. But I think it's a commercial service with. I haven't looked at it in any detail, but I'm sure the methodology is robust, but obviously open to all the flaws that you suggest, although I don't know where the cameras are, so I won't be able to influence them unless I can find out. But if I do, that's a good suggestion. But no, I won't do that.
I'm looking forward to an update, perhaps informally at our next informal cabinet meeting, when you can confirm whether you've spotted the cameras, and then Councillor Mickleborough can tell you whether he's actually been up in the numbers in any of the other market towns. Thank you very much. Are there any other comments or questions? Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. It wasn't about that subject, but you just made me think that in respect of, it's not a great metric. Yes, you can see people coming in, you can see people going out. I don't know which way it records, but at the end of the day, what our businesses need is they want to see, their turnover, their profit. That's what they want. They want people to come in, but they want people to also spend in our towns. So that's the priority. If we could see that sort of detail, that would be really good. I mean, yes, we can measure it by the amount of shops, cafes, closing down, but to see individual profits and expenditure within our market towns would be good. Probably something we can't do, but yeah. Anyway, that wasn't what I was going to ask. So, if I may, Chair, Councillor Ferguson, when we talk about the call centres and the time that our residents are, not having to hold on, at what point does that kick in? Because, as you know, I have had an email from one of my residents who has been very frustrated with the preamble into the call centres when they need to ask questions. They're finding it very frustrating from that point where they phone up to the amount of time it takes them to actually connect to a customer service representative. So I just want to understand at what point that call starts to click, and that's our call time. Because at the moment, I'm hearing from one of my residents that they are frustrated with the preamble and getting passed from pillar to post and not knowing which way to go before they even get to one of our representatives.
Councillor Ferguson.
So I'm speculating slightly, but as far as I know, it's from when the phone is answered. I don't really want to get into talking individual casework items, but I think all of us will have been frustrated at various times when we interact with any public or commercial services and we have to go through pressing buttons on the telephone to get through to the right service. But that's the only way, realistically, you can deliver a service that addresses the vast array of things we do using a very small and limited team, and to use them effectively. And I think it's, I understand the concerns. We always want to make our services accessible, but even though it might be frustrating, I think our performance on all of our metrics is exceptional. We are adding a new metric on customer satisfaction. So if people don't like that approach, then they will be able to vote afterwards. But I don't think realistically in the modern world that anybody, look, if I ring up the Inland Revenue or British Airways or any corporate or government body, I'm going to expect to be on the phone for hours, and that's not the case at HDC. And the only way we can deliver that service is by directing people. I think one of the complaints is that the resident in question couldn't get through to environmental health, but that doesn't happen. You don't get to talk to back office people without having your calls filtered so that we can direct people most appropriately. So I will respond to that request, but I think it's typical, and until the advent of AI, it's the best that we can do. But we are also investing and investigating those kind of enhancements, because I think it's always important that customers, or residents, let's not call them customers, residents have access to our service, and I think we do a good job. It's obviously not perfect, and sorry to have disappointed that resident, but we're trying the best we can.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. I think it also reminds us that we have an awful lot of information on our website that individuals can access. And interestingly, the casework, when it does come up, is quite helpful, because sometimes it will point us to something that we could have provided as part of our website that for whatever reason we might not yet have done, or somebody might not yet have found. So these are always, I think, I'm always reminded of the word that they're an opportunity for us to take that feedback, but thank you for raising that. Is there anything else anybody wishes to raise on this item before I move to the recommendations then? So we've got recommendations on page 683. Can I remind you that in making your decision on these recommendations, we've got a report in front of you which is as it stands today, but you've heard from Councillor Ferguson that there may be some additional ongoing tweaks, particularly to the key performance indicators. So in approving today, you're approving in principle with the report as it stands, but I want to remind you that actually we may still need the ability to make some very minor changes in light of those comments that Overview and Scrutiny made, and the ongoing work that's still going with officers that will happen before it comes back and effectively goes back to Overview and Scrutiny. So if you're content with that as as sort of the principles of the recommendations, are you happy for me to take the recommendation then as they're set out on page 683? And if I take them in two blocks, so the first one is the Cabinet recommendations, A and B. Are you happy to approve those as a block? In which case, can I have a show of hands, please, in favour? So this is Cabinet is recommended. Thank you. That's approved. And then the second one is that the Council is recommended. So again, we've got two recommendations there. Again, are you happy to take those on block? And can I have a show of hands in favour, please? And again, unanimous. Thank you very much. Well done, Cabinet. That takes us to the end of the items that we will do in public. I'm just going back to my original agenda. I've just got to scroll through. So this takes us then to item 7. So this is the exclusion of the press and public. So just before I read this, I just want to explain to those who are watching online, this is the point where I'm going to read a statement which explains what we're going to do next in the meeting. So this is to resolve that the public be excluded from the meeting because the business to be transacted contains exempt information relating to the financial or business affairs of any particular person, including the authority holding that information. So on that basis, can I have a show of hands to resolve to exclude the press and public, please? Thank you very much. In which case, press and public, I now need to ask you to leave the meeting. We will go off air for this item. We will not be returning to the live stream this evening because it's the final item before we close. Thank you very much if you've joined us online. If you're in the room and you need to leave, this is now your opportunity.